I I suppose is sort of a self-reflection of what I share with others, and this because I know that I've covered a lot of different things throughout the course of when I even started putting these videos up. Um, but there's a lot of times I use when the rubber hits the pavement, particularly when I go back to my earliest childhood when it relates to identity, right? And when you're androgynous, what I'm actually measuring is music. Whether the music or the waves of communication, which are the harmonics, are in tune. It's really what it is. So music is a method of what? Communication. So I was experiencing people that were out of tune. Right? Remember the 440 hertz that they changed? Right? I mean, I figure most people, right, that I've met love music. So you know that why would I spend so much of my time in my life spending time in nature? Being around big trees, thick forest, particularly boreal forest, mature trees. Being around roaring rivers, water, memory, right? And so what happens is that I try and shy away from words, letters and numbers or energy, that have a tendency, because of the way that we translate the mathematical geometric way in which music is experienced, because that's what we're doing. We're playing music. Okay? Together, right? So are we in tune or out of tune? Now we're into tuning and tuning stars. So at the end of the day, when you're running a radio set, you want your radio set to be able to do what? Broadcast through your antenna, DNA antennas, because a cell phone, right? A cell, a living consciousness cell, living particles of energy that are conscious and aware of itself, that are experiencing the music that we're playing. So music is communication. So you don't want any distortions in your music or you're out of tune, right? Okay, so what it means is we're learning how to tune, self-tune ourselves. And when you tie the word into an orchestra or a symphony, right, then you see the conductor of the orchestra, right? So that's a conductor, much like what? Inductors, superconductors, super conductivity, super holographic conductivity. So I realized that in the healing arts, and why I've referred to Mama as a healing artist. And the way that I perceive her, she's a healing artist. So the art is the communication of musical spheres. The spirit in the sphere. The living spirit that is in the sphere. The living spirit with a soul in the star, which is the living, breathing organism. From the smallest to the largest. From micro to the macro, right? So we're all playing music together that's in tune with all the stars. Now we're all translocating in consciousness between pre-phase and matter phase to translocate through all the stars, the grid network, the universal and galactic template. So when you're into the healing arts, the artist, which is the musician that's playing the music, then you realize that the music is what heals us. So we play songs. We sing songs, playing the notes. So the letters, the fire letters, are the notes, are the musical notes. So the math works, right? So the music as the math, the holographic speed of playing music. So there are no distortions and there are no distractions of redirects, right? Yeah, that's why when I was growing up as a child, we used to call mass media mass distractions. right? Doing everything to distract us from experiencing what love is, to create our own realities. Reality streams like live streams, holographic speed frame rate of speed, which are ratios. Ratio is a mathematical function, right? The speed ratio of the harmonics. So you want the waves, right, to be in harmony and be in balance. And balance, be in balance with the weight of the wave, right? Which is the weight of the consciousness, which is the consciousness that is experiencing the density in the dimension, right? So I realize when everything sort of becomes transparent when you're a small little boy and you're translating the musical terrain, the music that everybody's playing, right? So what it means is, gain a function on any radio set, programmable radio, programmable matter, radio waves, the radio body, right? Okay, so if you want somebody else to be able to pick up with their antenna what it is that you're communicating with our antenna or your antenna, then you want to be able to do what? Send a clear signal so that there's no mistranslation. Right? Oh, they got the signal all right. God landed behind enemy-held lines. Right? God consciousness, which is what love is. So love in the healing arts is the art of what I call honing your skills. Honing your skill sets. Or if you will, honing your guitar. Honing your music. Honing the communication skill of art. The first musician. The musician that is eternally in love with playing music. So those are your poets, those are your storytellers, right? And so we're the author or the authority, the command authority of our own music. And that's when you get into the, boy, that little girl, that little boy, or if you will, that spirit represented by that soul is playing beautiful music. Wow. Right? Remember like the old Pied Piper? Right? Dancing to the beat of your own drum. Those kind of euphemistical ways in which to communicate. So I realized, like the conversation that I had with Nathan yesterday about Aaron, right? And I mentioned to him that because when you're hypersensitive, okay, like I was as a child, I'm not supposed to experience any trauma, but through anything, ever, right? I'd freak out. If I got cut, I'm freaking out. I'm not supposed to have that happen to me. Are you kidding? That's like immediate repair. I'm not supposed to experience any trauma on any level, in any way, whether it's physical trauma, whether it's emotional trauma, whether it's spiritual torture, or whether it's physical, right? Yeah, because you're so sensitive to any loss of energy that we experience in us, either of something that happened to us as a result of the environment that we're operating in. Right? So it's like being willing to jump into, if you will, and bless your heart, Milo Stewart. Excuse me, Stewart. Wolf Clan. Milo. What's referred to as the law of peace. He did something, I guess it was either between yesterday and this morning. I do not pay attention to time. Not when you're phasing in and out so fast. I mean, being in time, knowing time. No time. Remember the old saying it goes, no memory, no batteries required? And so he's talking about the law of peace and corruption. Now, I take the information that he's experienced by virtue of what he's experienced, of what's held in cellular memory, right? And then I translate it to my own way, if you will, by what I've experienced. And I simply use different letters arrangements in the English language to describe it, to try and condense it down in ways in which, if you think of the conservation of energy or energy efficiency and communication, by being able to cross-index electrodynamically linked libraries of information held in cellular memories and all the records. Remember, information management services, service contracts, right? Librarian services, right? Record-keeping exercises, the Akasha, the Eka, right? You know, crystal records, right? Crystal shields, protecting your energy integrity, your spiritual integrity, right? Living in the truth, which is being what love is, because love doesn't live in fear of expressing who we really are, and that's really what it means to be born free. Born free as a spirit, you know? And I've always found throughout my entire life that when it comes to the healing arts of communication, it's trying to open a door, or what I call open the heart, so that that particular being, right, has the capacity, like a capacitor on a motherboard, to experience a greater expansion of his consciousness, to experience more love, right, through another, upon which it's able to heal, because now we're clearing the miasma body. So the art of communication is tied really directly into this, because you don't want to expose, just like the conversation with yesterday with Nathan, is that I'm very aware, because Nathan and Aaron were like boyfriends. They had a sexual relationship with each other. Okay? And so they were trying to kill each other. Is what it boils down to. They were both feeding on each other. And they both recognized that. They both said that. Right? And so when and because of that, it's, you know, these are the challenges of communication, the art of communication. When you realize how much love that I have for Aaron, okay, and for him to be able to actually experience that himself, because there's so much resistance, electrical resistance, because of the density that he's operating at. Because just like when I mentioned before the other day, when I'm talking about my target is to get up to pH 12. Okay? And he says to me, well, I'm going as acidic as I can. Okay, so you know the difference, the tension span difference in consciousness between going in one direction and going in the other direction. Particularly when it comes to bioregenesis, right? So, you know, one's an alkaline battery, if you will, and the other one's going to be an acid battery. So you know what happens with an acid battery. Right? So these are the challenges in the arts of healing communication, to try and without imposing your will on somebody, to break that resistance so that Aaron has a greater capacity to experience more love being communicated in ways that do not expose what he's held captive to, right? That he realizes that you're aware of, okay? And the potential risk of how he's going to react to the fact that you can read him, okay? Because of his own level of sensitivity, right? So this is where the art of healing arts of communication come in, where you want to maintain what I call the neutral zone, right? Which is 0. So that he's experiencing the communication, but in a way in which it's neutral. Do you understand what I mean by that? It's non-threatening, okay? It's not, he's not experiencing that you're trying to, and this is when you get into the arrogant side of things, okay? On how the intelligence side of the intelligence field, right? The EFFI, right? The electric force field intelligence. The intelligence side, remember, Ashadai uncovered the intelligence. They're highly intelligent, right? So you don't want to insult their intelligence. And so now you get into the competitive side of things. Remember I mentioned that in my childhood about the relationship I had with my father, because my father was a brilliant mathematician. He was an aeronautical engineer, right? And I know that by virtue of what my dad was able to do mathematically and geometrically. because he helped design. He was a senior design engineer that built the motor for the X-15. Right? So math and physics is involved in that, including music. Right? So it was my father that reminded me when I was a little boy, because of the peers that I was communicating with in elementary school about the male side, if you will. The male side is dominant, the intelligent side, see? And so how that plays into how we communicate, which is the balance between the electric and the magnetic, or if you will, the way that we define gender and nuclear physics, fission and fusion, how that's perceived by virtue of what we experience, being one with all creation. That we're gifting at the highest accelerated rate of speed between pre-phase and, pre-phase consciousness, okay, where you're going in and out of matter at such a high rate of speed, right? And how that works to be able to experience that, right? So it's one thing to sort of know how the math works with that in consciousness, but it's another thing to actually experience that, because it's a gift. It's an eternal gift, which is an eternal blessing, which is eternal gratitude. Because you realize when you're in a fallen system, how careful that you have to be in the way that we communicate. What it is that we are, by virtue of what we experience, by virtue of learning through experience, what we're experiencing, and how that works. Right? Particularly with self-directed learning. Now we're back in the learning speed and learning curve speed that can actually be graphed. And that's when Ashai Da'ayim would talk about the Bardo, which is how a sun will lock itself in because it can do the quantum probability math function of graphing all the potentials, which are the variables of knowing the future. By virtue of the rate of change that is taking place over time, space, and being able to, for consciousness to be able to manage its own math codes, to restore what it was once aware of in the beginning, what it once was in the beginning, which was the original template. Okay? And so, as I've sort of known since I was a child, what I was measuring is the resistance to do that. So when the light is exposing, it's like being transparent windows. We can see right through you, right? Because it's like map reading the operator. So when you're androgynous and you're at zero, which means perfect balance, it means that you're measuring something that isn't in balance. By virtue of how much resistance is in place in that DNA operating system, or motherboard, if you will, on how long it would take in order to do what? Clear it all. Clear it all. All the distortions, right? And every DNA operating system, or if you will, every living cell, or if you will, every unit of consciousness that is represented as energy. Is that little particle of energy experiencing what love is, right? So you see how that sort of works. So once the quantum probability function realizes that there isn't enough time, right, to recover these units of consciousness, because of how long it would take before that would ever happen. And this plays directly into the math of, say, collapsing one galaxy to another one, to another one, to another one, right? Now we're into the torque speed differential between how long it would take and why I use the term the vampire chasing the artist, the original artist, how much we keep losing by virtue of becoming aware of that much more of what we are losing, right? And how God's original mathematics, if you will, of creation spheres has a built-in failsafe to protect itself from losing itself down a hole. Right? So now we're back to music. Learning how to play music again. Right? So that our notes are in balance. The chords, like when you play a guitar, playing a chord. How the letters and numbers work with notes. C, F flat, and how sound and ah la la, Sha-na-na, and the songs that we sing, right, that lift the spirit, heal the crown, right? And so that we're experiencing our energy field, our auric energy field, in a state of balance. So that means we're able to tune the stars and protect the gates, and that's when competition goes right into that, and abandonment issues that I had mentioned in a previous video. I am very familiar with abandonment issues. I've experienced abandonment. I've experienced abandonment a lot. And not just in my own life, but in others. Right? Think about it. Aaron was attempting suicide over, believe it or not, an abandonment issue. And this is when you get into victimizer software. See, Aaron had no control over what was going to happen with Koa, did he? Aaron can be up there taking a bath and somebody's out there and grabs the dog, and he's not even aware of it. He doesn't even know the circumstances that led to why it is he's trying to kill himself. But all he knows is that the dog is gone. Right? So the way that the victimizer works within a state of mind, a state of consciousness related to a black hole, right? And I know because I've experienced that as a result of when you're a transmutation machine and you're experiencing, if you try and quantify this and qualify it between two magnets in a planetary consciousness field, when you're a little boy and you're experiencing, because you're able to experience it all, how much trauma is actually being experienced every day, or if you will, every second, being connected to the all creation in the loss and gain between resistance and capacitors to experience no resistance. So they're experiencing the primal sound and light field. They're experiencing eternal unconditional love through their own heart and soul, or if you will, they're experiencing love. So that's a communication signal. They're experiencing being loved, right? And their ability to be able to tune into that and go, wow, that feels good. The music feels good. That music is healing me. Thank you very much for the music, right? The healing arts of a musician. So when they think of ascended masters, but I don't use the master because how that's perceived by others, right? In competition. The way that competition is perceived, because competition was inducted, or if you will, introduced on a massive scale into the planetary consciousness field by mass saturation, mass media saturation. And they were pushing it in every sector, right? Games. I mean, it's all you got to do is go buy yourself a cell phone and games are put right into the system. Play a game, right? Crossword puzzles, play hearts, play spades, right? Gamers, AI war gamers, right? So I already know in my heart, for example, God is not competing against himself in his own mirror, right? So the game is a binary game, playing ping pong. I'm better than you are. However they translate that, and I'm competing against you instead of collaborating together to build thriving communities, right? So that was a very important part to understand how competition works, particularly when you're translating how you experience what competition does, or if you will, the result thereof, between negative and positive magnetic polarity, between two poles on the planet, between an inverter and a torque converter. The suction machine and the transmutation machines, or if you will, the loss and gain of electrons. Now you're into the tables again, right? The water tables, the water columns, right? Because everything that moves on the planet through all the channels and all the circuits you can actually quantify this across the entire electromagnetic spectrum on the planet just by using a simple experience, such as when you order something online and you have a bank account using a magnetic strip card with a number that is associated to your number, which is a biometric account, right? Say, for example, you get something on Amazon. Hey, we're going to take the money right out of your account. Okay, so that's an exchange rate because you're using the value of dollars, right? The value that is associated with a dollar. So you can go look at the exchange rate of a dollar by going to a bank that does international exchanges, right? On the value of the dollar. I don't know what the value of the dollar is now, right? But I did grow up at a time when the gold standard, or silver and gold standard, was still in effect, because I took a paycheck that I got working on a car wash when I was about 11 years old. So this would have been around 1962. And I was able to go down to a security bank, and they had right there on the edge of the teller, it said gold window. So I could take a paper check with some numbers on it, and they would give me actual gold. It wasn't until 1973 when President Nixon ended all that. And of course, you can tie all this back to, not uncoincidentally, 1933 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And go look at the correct congressional record. What was it? House Joint Resolution, I think it's 1492, associated with Columbus. How the numbers correlate, right, between negative and positive magnetic polarity. The number games. The QI, the inorganic Metatronic system, right? The beast technology. 666, 18. Now that's back to 9. How 3 is a very important figure because you can take a 3, right, where the 3 looks like this, do it, and then a 3 that looks like this, do it, right? Jeet. When you combine them both together, you get an 8. 8 days a week. Never wound up like an 8-day clock. And how those sort of codes are experienced as code talkers communicating with one another, like because the Guardian materials, those numbers and those sort of metaphorical ways to describe the numbers as energy in music is sort of the laughter is medicine way in which to experience identification. It's a very fascinating way in which some of the peers that I grew up with, even though I realized I was surrounded by order followers. And Milo Stewart talked about that, okay, about he refers to natives and non-natives, okay, about look what they're doing. They're completely corrupted. Why would they follow people that are completely corrupted, which are all the corporations and all the rest of that, and you tie that all into the history of corporations, if you will, onto the Asha Diane stuff for the Voyager materials, and then how that relates to what I was experiencing as a child, because I simply translated mathematically on a little bit of a different scale in the way I use the words to describe that as experience versus the way that he would describe that from a native point of view, right, as Wolf Clan, as corruption. I knew it as a child as self-suicide program. So in other words, I'm experiencing, at 5 and 6 years of age, what I become aware of, which is I'm in a civilization that is going to go extinct. This is a mass extinction event if there isn't a course direction change, right? So that means I was aware of what Asha Diane was talking about, which is the bardo, which means that the fall. In other words, when you reach what they call the point of no return, right? Return rate of exchange, the ability to experience balance again, 0, right? Which means it's not making a course correction with its compass, with its magnetic compass, right? To be able to experience more light, the capacity for it to experience more light, and thus experience God consciousness, or if you will, the primal sound and light field. So if that line went dead, and they have an inability to restore themselves as a non-repairable, if you will, okay, and because of the choices that it makes now to experience the result of that. So in other words, it keeps doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, but the result is always the same. It's not recovering. It's not recovering. It's not recovering. It's not recovering. It's like a drill press. It's like a drill press going up and down. And it's doing the same thing up and down over and over and over again. And everything that it's doing over and over again is to make sure that it self-terminates. Right? So you can measure that across the planetary consciousness terrain, across the electromagnetic spectrum. Right? On life expectancy. Right? Between acid and alkaline. And so when you get into black holes, right, black hole states of consciousness, you realize how long is it going to take to recover this race, this seeded race. And that's when you get into breeding patterns and breeding experiments and breeding patterns related to sound and light patterns of consciousness, right? To restore the mathematics, the geometry of sound and light. To experience perfect balance. Experience what love is goes on forever. So anyway, it is the art, the healing arts of communication. If you will, being able to heal a unit of consciousness, a unit of self-awareness without saying a word. Just being present. Love is present. Have a great day. We love you all. Be good yourselves.